Crucified, a Naruto and Bible crossover fanfiction. Now, if you're triggered by this, you can leave. Get out of here. I don't want your neckbeard here anyway. Ian. This story was inspired by my mom and her teachings. She is a United Methodist pastor and has taught me to look at the world with different eyes. One of her most eye-opening things she said was that you can always find a reference to the Bible in most TV shows. This story involves crucifixion and other religious themes. Also death, gore, and several other pieces that may not be suitable for the weakest stomach, or those who are empathetic. Disclaimer, I do not own Naruto, or any character of the anime, manga, Naruto. I claim no rights to the Bible either, or the story of Jesus. I say it's a story because it was told by others for a long time, so the truth can be bent in the retelling of such a powerful tale. He died. He rose from the grave, and he shall rise again. He was born to bring the world out of evil and into salvation. He died to be the eternal sacrificial lamb for our sins. He rose again to defy the grip death had over the world. He was the first, but he was not the last. Naruto! Sakura screamed as she banged on the door. It was almost noon. Kakashi had arrived at the meeting point, yet the annoying blonde idiot hadn't. Open this damn door now! She had been banging on the door for 5 minutes by now. Even the neighbors heard her and were staring out their windows or doors, wondering what was going on. Ever thought that he may be sick? Sasuke asked from beside the door. He was shooting the nosy neighbors. Oh God, angry glares. Okay, never mind. He hated public displays like this. He could have at least contacted someone to tell us, Sakura said as she stopped banging on the door. Her hand was starting to hurt and she was gently rubbing it to get the numbness out. Ever thought of trying the doorknob? Kakashi spoke up. He stood there just reading his book. He looked bored, as always. Sakura sighed as she tried the knob. It was a stupid idea. Click, that worked! Sakura peeked her head in, her face scrunched at the look of the place, but what could she expect? Even her room was starting to look like a mess with all the missions they had been doing lately. Sasuke followed behind her and Kakashi behind him, closing the door once in. Naruto? Sakura called out as she moved through the apartment. Quickly locating his bedroom, she turned and walked back. I'm not going into his room. Sakura blushed. She didn't care, as it was Naruto. Just the fact that it was a boy's room. On the last day of Passover, he took the bread, gave thanks and said, "This is my body, given for you. Take, eat in remembrance of me." He broke the bread and passed it to those with him. After the meal was finished, he took a cup, and in it poured red wine. Again he spoke, "This is my blood, spilled for you, for the forgiveness of your sins. Take, drink, in remembrance of me." Kakashi walked up to Naruto's bedroom door. He raised his hand to knock, but stopped. An odd feeling of foreboding crept over him and made his stomach churn. Taking a deep breath through his mouth, he silently knocked. "Naruto, are you okay?" He waited until there was no answer. He knocked again and called out a little louder to his young subordinate. Still, there was no reply. "Just open the door and look," Sasuke coldly said. He was pissed, to say the least. He was losing out on valuable training time. Training he needed to defeat his older brother Itachi and make him pay for the sin of killing his family. "I'm just making sure he knows I'm coming in," Kakashi replied as he reached for the handle. As soon as he touched the cool metal, he remembered something. "Kakashi-sensei, I have to tell you something," Naruto said, coming up to his teacher. Naruto wasn't smiling. He looked to be very serious, in fact. "What is it, Naruto?" Kakashi looked over his ever-present book at the young boy. "In a few days, I won't arrive to training. Don't worry about me, please. Don't worry about what has happened to me. For where I am going, it's so others won't have to suffer. I'm going to take the sins of this village under my own and save this place." Naruto replied, "My body won't leave this village, but my spirit will fight for it against evil." Kakashi looked at his student a little harder, not fully understanding. Yet Naruto continued,
3 days after I will return. I will rise again before ascending.
Naruto stopped there and smiled up at Kakashi.
Please take care of Sakura and Sasuke for me.
Naruto then turned and ran back to his training, leaving behind a rather confused and stunned Kakashi.
Kakashi-sensei,
Sakura called out. Kakashi jerked back from his thoughts to see Sakura waving her hand in front of his face.
can we please get this over with? This place is kind of cold.
Kakashi smiled and nodded at her before turning the knob and looking in. The sight made his stomach flip before slamming the door shut and turning to his students.
Sakura, go get Snad Sama quickly. Sasuke, go find Jiraiya. He's most likely at the bats. Go!
He yelled as his students jumped and ran out of the building faster than Kakashi's ever seen. The people, who only a week before welcomed into the city with open arms and words of praise, were now yelling at him. A chorus of voices rang out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" When the man they were asking refused, he sent him to another, who claimed no right to the man's life. Thus, he was sent back. Again, the people yelled out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" The man gave the people a choice. A known murder was brought out. The choice: a man who has committed no crimes against the people, a man who they once welcomed with open arms and praise, or a man who has slaughtered innocent children without a care. The people chose the murder. The man asked turned to the people and declared that he will let them do as they pleased, but that he washed his hands of the whole ordeal. Thus, the blood that was already coming from the once welcomed man was washed from his hands, turning the water a yellow, rusty color. Let's pee-pee. Kakashi waited until he was certain that his two students were far enough away before opening the door and slipping into the room. He kept his eyes closed, not wanting to see the sight again. He shut the door behind him and turned to face it. Breathing deeply did nothing to steel his nerves. Doesn't that, well, in the context that you're saying steel, that actually means that he's just like a rock. He's got so many nerves that he just can't be stopped. But what you actually meant was steel, like written like the metal, which means that he's going to throw up everywhere. For the scent was gut-wrenching. I think you also meant scene. For the scene was gut-wrenching. He closed his eyes and, in a wave of temporary strength, he turned around and stepped away from the door. Blood. That was the first thing he saw. It painted the floor, as to which his sight was gazed. What? Yeah, as to which his sight was gazed. The wood of the floor barely noticed underneath the wood of the floor was barely noticeable. Barely noticed underneath the still wet liquid. He bit his lip as his gaze followed the spreading river to the wall. The sight there was making him turn and close his eyes. Naruto. That day, before the man was to be sent to jail, he was tortured, whipped with canes until he could barely feel his back. Then, his torturers set the slightly red-tinged canes aside. They picked up a whip-like device called a cat-o'-nine-tails, leather straps with bits of sharp metal and broken clay, even bone tied to the ends. The first blow struck and tore flesh and muscle, causing blood to run to the stone floor, splashed upon the stone column he was chained to. They whipped his back, his legs, his sides, and when there was no more flesh, they turned him over and continued until not an ounce of flesh didn't have a cut or blood running from it. The touchier were stuffed. the touchier. The man had to be alive for tomorrow anyways. Kakashi turned his gaze back to the figure, who now hung from the red-painted wall. Its head hung limply to face the ground, eyes still opened and glazed over, arms stretched out further than should be possible, kunai stuck in each wrist to ensure the figure did not fall. Blood dried already where it once ran so easily. The figure wore no cloth, but some torn bed sheets now tainted red to cover up what little dignity was left. The body was covered in cuts and bruises. Parts of the flesh peeled away to reveal muscle and bone. Even the legs were torn up with lacerations and other markings. The feet were also held to the wall. A single kunai to give support was lodged below the feet. Several needles pierced the flesh of the feet to secure it to the wall. Shuriken with wires that crossed the body in certain places were also logged into the wall, the fine wire cutting into the skin and causing more blood flow than one could take. Behind the body was painted a blood-red structure. one Kakashi had seen in certain religious houses. You mean like a church. A cross, also called a tree, but usually called a cross, mostly made of wood, except the metal nails to keep it together. Sometimes it was a real tree, according to one of the men Kakashi had asked on the subject. The once welcomed, now condemned man was laid upon the tree which was not yet raised. The men laughed as they drove the nails into his wrists. When his arm wouldn't reach to the other side, one of the men pulled until his bone popped out of place and he reached. Now, nailed into place. A block was placed at his feet, pushed up slightly so his knees bent. The block was first nailed to the tree, then his feet, laid one over the other, was nailed to the block. Without a though, without a though, without a though, the men flipped the tree over. Blood dripped from the man to the ground, now only inches from his face. The nails were bent at the end, so that they wouldn't come out. Again, the tree was flipped over and raised as well. With a thud and a thickening squish, the tree was placed into a hole and kept in place.
Kakashi, open this door before I kick it in.
From what I remember of Naruto, I just remember a lot of really gruff men speaking voices, so I'm going to assume every adult male has this voice. Kakashi snapped his head around to look at the door he didn't realize he had leaned up against. As quickly as possible, he opened the door and slipped out to rush to the bathroom. It didn't take long for gasps, the sounds of people dropping to the floor, and crying to reach Kakashi's ears as he ran cold water over his head. He was still trying to get over the thought that somehow he knew. Naruto knew this was going to happen to him. Now the blonde boy hung from a wall in his own room, drained of blood and life.
I'm going to take the sins of this village under my own and save this place.
Once Kakashi regained what little composure he could, he walked out of the room. Not yet ready to face the room with horror within, he noticed Sakura lying passed out on the couch. Sasuke sitting in a chair in the kitchen looking ready to kill something or someone. Tsunade walked out of the room shaky. She turned to look at Kakashi, her eyes questioning.
What does he mean?
Jiraiya asked from inside the room. Tsunade and Kakashi merely turned their eyes in the direction of his voice, not wanting to look into that room again.
Father, forgive them for they not know not what they do. What the fuck? Whoa, whoa, whoa! Did he mean by that?
Jiraiya roared. The sky steadily grew darker as a storm rolled in faster than the area could ever recall. Before the first strike of lightning flew across the sky, the condemned man, the broken man, looked up to the sky. He did not look scared. No negative emotion shone in his eyes towards the ones who did this to him. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He called out to the heavens above. His body then went lax. His chin fell to his chest and lightning flashed across the sky, the thunder following. Deafening, earthquakes consumed the area, cracking a sacred shroud in the temple. After the area settled down, the man, now declared dead, was taken down from the tree. He was wrapped in burial shrouds and placed within a tomb. Fear for what this man said before his death to his followers. A giant boulder was placed before the entrance, so the dead could not walk again. That night, Anbu took to body down off the wall with as much care as they could. The boy was wrapped in white linen, since it was impossible to put proper burial clothes on him. His funeral the next day was a closed casket funeral. The casket was then placed in a tomb upon the request of Kakashi. He truly believed that in 3 days, Naruto would come back. The Kyuubi could heal him, save him. The tomb was sealed with a slab of rock for no reason whatsoever. Naruto's name and information placed upon the door, as well as a poem that the girls made for his memory. Roses are red, violets are blue, Naruto's dead. 3 days after the man was placed in the tomb, 2 women headed there to anoint his body in oils. Upon nearing the tomb, they noticed the guard there was knocked out. The stone before the tomb was rolled away. Fearing that their lord's body was stolen, they walked into the tomb. As soon as they entered, a brilliant light that lit every corner of the tomb shone from a man sitting upon the rock bed that their lord once laid. His body, now gone. The man with the brilliant light spoke to the women, telling them not to fear, that their Lord was safe and had done as he promised, that he had risen from the shroud of death, breaking its hold on the people. The women, thrilled by this news, rushed from the tomb to tell their friends. All the way, they cried out, "He has risen! He has risen!" The tomb had not been visited in 3 days. Sunaid had placed an Anbu to guard the tomb from robbers, vandalism, and others who wished harm against the one laying within. Sakura and Hinata were walking towards the cemetery. They carried incense and flowers to place around the tomb. It took some time, but they were able to get permission from Sunaid to go to Tsunade to go near the tomb. As they approached where the guard was, they noticed the man knocked out. Fearing the worst, they ran to the tomb, only to find the stone slab placed there was cracked and scattered on the ground. Fearing for their comrade's body, they looked into the tomb only to be blinded by a bright light. The light did little to hide the man that sat on the stone bed where once their comrade laid. The light also did little to hide the fact that he had fox ears and tails. The man smiled at them before he spoke, and assumed this is God, or the Naruto version of God. And since I like to think that human ears can't understand God, I'm just going to make noises for this whole sentence. The man vanished, and the two girls left the tomb in shock. When it finally sank in, they turned to look at each other. They squealed in delight, then ran to tell Tsunade what they saw. Two of the man's friends were traveling along a road between two towns. Along the way, they saw a man who looked tired and in need of water. They stopped and offered him some of their drink and some company. When they were about to leave, the man on the road spoke to them and reveled himself to them. They were excited that their Lord had risen. He asked the two friends to go to his other friends and gather them. The two men nodded and ran as fast as they could to gather their friends together. Shikamaru and Choji were walking through the forest. They were heading back into town from Shikamaru's favorite cloud-gazing spot. Along the way, they saw a figure wrapped in rags that they didn't recall seeing on the way to the spot. They approached the man warily. The man greeted them with a weak wave and a happy hello. Shikamaru offered the man some water, which he happily drank. Choji offered the man some bread, which he happily partook of. Then they then sat and talked of current events. When Choji mentioned to Shikamaru that they should head back, the man stood. He took off his cover and smiled at the two. They just stood there in shock until Choji went over and touched him, making sure it wasn't a henge.
I understand that you may have many questions. Please, go back and gather our friends. Tell them to meet me at the Hokage's office. When you are all gathered, I shall appear there.
With that, Naruto vanished. Once everyone had gathered in a small room, they locked the doors and windows, for many were trying to kill them. After much talking, they noticed a stranger in the room. Simply listening, one of the men got angry and told him to leave. The stranger took off his cloak and reveled himself to them. It was their Lord. He spoke kindly to them and told them not to be afraid through this time, for they would survive. One of the men doubted that it was really their Lord until he asked to touch where the nails were driven into his wrists and feet. The Lord allowed it, and the man began crying for doubting their Lord. Once everyone had calmed down and conversation was little, the Lord said his farewells. A bright light from heaven above engulfed him, and he vanished into it. Once Shikamaru and Choji were able to get everyone into the Hokage's office, people began speaking. Many of them didn't believe what Shikamaru, Choji, Sakura, and Hinata were saying. As the arguing increased, Neji looked over to a dark corner and noticed someone was there.
Hey you, how dare you enter here without permission? Show yourself and leave.
Neji demanded. All attention in the room turned to the figure in the shadows as it stepped out into the light. Blonde hair shined and blue eyes, now filled with life, smiled back at them. Everyone gasped as Naruto showed himself. Sasuke didn't believe it was him and demanded to see proof. Naruto showed the holes that kunai once stuck out of, as well as the holes the needles made on his feet.
Do you believe now, Sasuke?
The vice spoke, a little coarse, but it was Naruto's voice. People began crying as realization hit them. Before them stood Naruto, their once dead friend. As soon as they crying stopped, the questions started. They asked if he was back for good, but he didn't answer. Shikamaru asked how it was possible for him to come back. That was when he repeated that what he once said for Kakashi.
Don't worry about what has happened to me, for where I am going, it's so others won't have to suffer. I'm going to take the sins of this village unto my own and save this place.
Everyone looked at him in shock. Tsunade demanded an explanation, as did Jiraiya and several others. Naruto only smiled at him.
There is much that I cannot answer, and so little I can.
Naruto spoke.
Yet my time is short and already running out.
A smile, a real smile, came to Naruto's lips.
Take care, everyone. I shall come gain someday.
With that, a bright light engulfed Naruto, and they saw him slowly disappear right before their eyes. Again, people began crying and trying to comfort others at the same time. In time, Naruto's tomb was repaired. A new message was carved onto the entrance this time. He died. He rose from the grave. He shall rise again. Thank you for watching. I can't believe you stuck through this whole video, or you just skipped to the end to get to the thanks and then to watch the video that I put here at the end. If you did that, you suck. But I still love you. If you want to watch more just random fan fiction videos, click them in the top right corner. If you want to watch a video that has nothing to do with my channel whatsoever, click in the bottom left corner. And if you want to buy shirts and shit, click them in the top left corner. Now get out of here. Just go to sleep.